So I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by two of my dear friends from Ukraine, both who are some of the first interviews that we did on the channel, and of course who were fantastic collaborators for the event that we ran in Lviv, which was pretty much a year ago. Of course, it's high time to do another one, and that's one of the things we've been talking about today. I'm joined by Orest and Marta, who are passing through the UK. I'm going to ask them a bit more about their activities. They are ambassadors for Ukraine internationally and have some interesting impressions about how the world perceives Ukraine and how perhaps Ukrainian diplomacy, soft power, could be improved and increased at this critical time in the war. Marta and Orest, welcome.
Thank you for inviting for such an interview.
Nice to see you,
nice
again.
to see you again, really.
Now, this time is our third meeting actually, and
Yes.
we are back in UK, right? The first one was in a pub in Oxford, the next one was in the pub in Lviv, and now in the pub just outside of Oxford. So yeah.
We won't say exactly where, for various reasons of security and so on, but no, it's a lovely country pub by a river somewhere in Oxford. None will possibly... Oxfordshire. Yes. No one possibly guess where that might be. Let's talk a little bit about your plans, but then let's talk about this idea of soft diplomacy. So what have you guys been doing? Where have you been? And how does that fit in with the idea of projecting the image of Ukraine, a positive image of Ukraine?
Okay, so basically a lot have happened since the last time we met. As far as I remember, we organized our event in August, right? So exactly a year. Then I was working hard to provide like a international visit of over 50 people to Ukraine, and we actually executed it successfully in October. So basically we traveled to Lviv, then to Kyiv, Kharkiv, and all the way to Izum by the front line. This was kind of the first during the active war time like project when non-diplomatic people, non-aid workers, not journalists, but regular travelers who want to educate themselves more about the situation in Ukraine visit our country. It was also very important from the perspective to show a sign to international community that Ukraine can be visited. It should be visited because the personal visit opens up so many doors, right? And this is the most basic act of support you can provide. And this provides understanding. So if we remember, let's say early 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and then the entire world was watching what was happening in our country, as soon as the Russian forces pulled off from Kyiv area, every self-respected president of every West democratic nation was doing a pilgrimage to Kyiv, because this is your personal visit is the first act. So that was my something I've been working on hard last year, and eventually it evolved. So this produced a lot of meaningful connections all around the world, and basically since November I'm actively pursuing this unofficial ambassadorship path, if put it that way, traveling around the world, building meaningful connections between Ukraine and the rest of the free world.
And Marta, it seems that art and soft power, cultural power, is an incredibly powerful way to connect. There's an exhibition at the moment on Ukrainian modernism. It really helps to keep Ukraine in the headlines. Have you been using art to engage with communities around the world and help them understand what's going on in Ukraine and Ukrainian resistance through the prism of art and culture?
Yes, art and culture is really a great tool for soft cultural diplomacy or grassroots cultural diplomacy, I would say like that. And in Ukraine we have many initiatives, and one of that initiatives is mine own. So I travel a lot, I do art events, I participate in some conferences as a speaker, just to tell about Ukrainian culture through art, contemporary art mostly, because contemporary art gives the current situation about Ukraine, and contemporary art reflects what's happening in the society. So that's a really powerful tool also, because through images you can access more and more people. You don't need to know the language actually, just to understand and reflect and feel what we are feeling in Ukraine. So that's a very good way to communicate with people, build meaningful connections, and just get to know each other, and also get to know other people's opinion. And maybe in the future, that's my dream, when the war is finished, to invite my partners, those people who invited me to participate in their events or to collaborate with them. I want to invite them to Ukraine. So it's really a powerful tool, I think, because many people, like intelligent people, those people who are thinking out of the box, those curious people, one of their channels they get the information is through culture and art, actually, especially in Western countries. So yeah, it was pretty active time for me since we met last time. And I continue to do this international art projects, especially with Taiwan. Taiwan is one of the countries which is really, I think I have so many connections now with them, maybe the same as in Ukraine, with their cultural and art society and professionals, because they are very interested. And yeah, so that's, I'm trying to be there in that Asian region, because the presence of Ukraine there is really it's almost no presence there of us.
It's actually, remember, it was actually a pretty interesting way how we established connections with Taiwan.
Yeah.
So it's worth noting that our honeymoon 10 years ago started in Taiwan, you know.
Yes.
So we really enjoyed how the country is looking for and so on. And obviously geopolitically, it's in a similar situation than Ukraine. So basically when Russia invaded firsthand 2 years ago, Taiwanese were like particularly curious and were watching very closely what was happening in Ukraine, because like in relation to how the world would react to Ukraine, China was doing the second move, right? And so far we've been to Taiwan several times. When I started war reporting in 2022, like a lion's share of this like newly established audience actually were Taiwanese people, and that's how we continued with the culture sphere. And we were in Taiwan during the election, you remember? You were during election, I was just before the election.
Yes.
And it's very interesting that the global media portray Taiwan and China like being on a like one step ahead from the war, but in reality on the ground it's very, very different anticipation, which can lead in different ideas here. But also I just remember 2022, 23rd of February, and I was drinking coffee with my friend in one of the chic bars in Lviv, talking about the future business and so on. But then we woke up with the war. So I mean, this kind of provides a good perspective of how things develop in the world. And when Marta told that Ukraine is not present in Asia, it definitely makes sense. First of all, Asia is a sleeping giant, so the economy of Asian countries are picking up now very fast. Just to give an example, I was in Bangladesh visiting the Rohingya refugee camp, which is the largest refugee camp in the world of the entire nation fleeing from neighboring Myanmar, where is a civil war happening at the moment. And people of Bangladesh are a good role model example, like not the role model, but a clear example of a so-called global South representative. And their perspective of the world and on Russo-Ukrainian war is completely different from this what you guys have here in the West, So I mean, there is a lot of
this kind of education, actually. It's needed there. And for example, if to take our official cultural diplomacy, we have special Ukrainian institutes, special institutions, but they have maybe for each region, they have only 2 countries per year they're focused on, because they have limited resources. So what we do as not official representatives, we just try to cover all the rest with our horizontal connections, with our smaller but I believe powerful initiatives, because we can go deeper into countries and regions and just build these connections, and we really need them and we really search for them. So yeah, it's quite interesting. So not only in Southeast Asia, not only in Taiwan or East Asia, but also, for example, as for me, I would love to establish more connections in the US, for example. So yes, it's exciting. It's kind of a challenge also, because you need to move a lot. You need to negotiate flight, all this logistics and all of that. It's really not easy, but it's generally not easy for Ukrainians live during the war. So I believe, it's still manageable, and we are doing pretty okay now.
Now, it's said that Russia has invested and continues to invest a huge amount in propaganda in the global south, India and so on. You've been to many of these sort of places which are a focus of Russia's propagandistic efforts. Is it the case that these messages are really sort of lapped up and believed by people, or actually are the perceptions on the ground a little more complex, and are they open to hearing an alternative narrative?
Yeah, I can provide you like a clear examples. So I've been to Bangladesh and I've been to Kolkata in India, during that time. And, as soon as people hear that I'm from Ukraine, you take the Uber ride or like, just hop on the back on the motorcycle. The dominant majority of people lean towards the Russian side, I would say so. Then, when you start arguing with them, different discussions appear. By the way, if you permit me, I encourage your viewers to check out both videos. One about what Bangladeshis think about Russo-Ukrainian war, and another one is what Indians are thinking about Russo-Ukrainian war. I believe this will be pretty eye-opening for many people. But in general, the paradigm is the following, is that this is not your fault, it's all Americans. This is number one, what they tell.
Yeah.
The second is that historically Russia was our good friend. So Bangladeshis were trying to also to educate me that during their war of independence in 1971, Russia was supporting them while the West was supporting Pakistan. The same story with India. So this built up a lot of stuff. And then like an example would be Rosatom is building the first nuclear power station in Bangladesh, which is the big investment for them. And then this is like a checkmate. It's really hard to contradict those facts. However, when you try to appeal, but look, you can clearly see that one country invaded another, It's like black and white for the rest of the planet. They're like, yeah, but it's still about the America, you don't understand, I know better, this kind of stuff. And, this put me in the position into how could I explain this, Because we are talking about the over half of global population, who think that way. So I tell them look, your country is, has a danger of starvation because of not enough supply of grain, which mainly was coming from the Ukraine and Black Sea region. So this risk is not because of Ukraine and war in Ukraine. This risk is because Russia actually invaded Ukraine, mined Ukrainian fields, and blocked Ukrainian ports for export. And then they start to think, So I believe this is also very necessary to visit those places to understand the local psyche. And because we are living in a very complicated world, you need to understand the people perspective, their position, and then find the way to their head and to their heart. Because every country is different.
Yeah, I agree with that. As for me, usually I communicate with very intelligent people, because people who are involved into art, all of that stuff. And sometimes also, even in countries which are supportive to Ukraine, I found those very intelligent and brilliant people, and they are telling me about brother nations and so on. I agree with Orest. So in each country, I need to know the context and the history of the country in order to put the special wars just to explain them. But also, as for me, sometimes it's very challenging, because it's like re-traumatizing myself again and again, explaining the same, which you think should be obvious. So sometimes, from my perspective, especially if you're talking with very educated people, it's really I'm oh no, again. So yeah, it takes some, efforts and mental efforts also, just to, put yourself and, in a good mood, and, okay, now I need to explain because maybe it's not that obvious. Yeah, so that's
the challenge, isn't it? Because Russia will weaponize sport, it will weaponize literature, culture, things which, well, let's be fair, many countries have done that in the past, but there's a disconnect between when we might have done that and perhaps we didn't do it nearly to the same extent that Russia is doing. They're prepared to weaponize absolutely everything. And that's quite a difficult concept for people to get their heads around, especially if, they love Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and all this kind of stuff. They think of it as being neutral, whereas you can't blame necessarily the authors because they're long dead and they have nothing to do with the current situation. But those cultural artifacts are weaponized and used within Russia's aggression.
Yes, that's correct. And it's very hard for people to understand this. So you need to really talk through a lot of facts and history and some examples for them just to reflect on that. And okay, yeah, you're right. It takes time and efforts, but it's worth it because we need people to understand. It's just not obvious. It's obvious for us, but not for all people.
Well, it's a year since we met in Lviv, and Lviv is relatively safe, but there were missile strikes just before I arrived and just after I arrived in Lviv, and we travelled around and saw some of those impact sites. That was deeply affecting. And of course, 5 or 6 times a day the air raid sirens go off. Now you're out there helping to push the image of Ukraine around the world, but you do go back to Ukraine. We're now in the 3rd year of war. What is your impression? I mean, people must be generally exhausted. They still know the threat is existential. They know what Russia would do if it was to triumph. No one wants that. But it must be just exhausting. I mean, every single person will know friends, family who are either missing, captured, or killed, or currently in service. That's a huge amount for anyone to deal with. What are your impressions when you go back to Ukraine?
So I just traveled from Ukraine to here like 3 weeks ago. Each time I'm coming back, I feel that the situation is more and more tough with the society, maybe because it's, through the time you get very tired and emotionally exhausted. That's true. People still keep up, they still donate a lot, they still fight, they still believe, they still, all of that, of course, but mentally it's really hard to process. So what I see in the society now, people are doing their best. We have some problems inside the country and we have huge problems outside with the war, right? But still people are trying to do their business and they're trying to do to live their life as normal as they can. So in Lviv, the situation is still okay. When we have this air sirens, people don't care that much because now we have the first siren, which shows that it's just general alert. And then if the missiles are coming or drones to the region near to Lviv, we have the second alert, and that's the time we are considering to go to the shelters. So now it's very advanced technology. You can track all the missiles and drones. So now it's really like you're on your phone just checking everything. It's still scary, but because our brain kind of adapted to that long time ago, it's scary, but that's the reality. So people don't care that much, they just track it.
I could add also.
One thing I want to tell, that my circle of people, I have beautiful people surrounding me. They are trying to live their life, the best life they can have, because when you know that the danger is so close and you have this feeling inside that if not today, maybe never, really. So some people, they're just frozen, they don't know what to do, but most of the people from my surroundings, they just try to live their life and work, donate, and enjoy. I mean, if I can say like that in the circumstances.
I would say that definitely the energy inside is not at the same level as it used to be on the first month of invasion, because there, like, we were resisting, there were these, during the first 2022, there were a range of successful counteroffensive. I would like to remind how everything was starting. Russia invaded, starting a 3-day special military operation, which is now in the 3rd year. And then Ukrainian took off back, reclaimed the North Ukraine in March, in early April. Then there was a successful counteroffensive in the east, in Kharkiv province, in September, right? And in November, we took back the western side of the Dnieper River in Kherson Oblast. So, it was like emotionally going up. Then the 2nd year was mostly stagnating because the entire front line barely moved. Everybody was anticipating the super hyped Ukrainian counteroffensive, which didn't succeed, unfortunately. And this year we see things start moving on the ground again, which puts some perspective, I would say. But in general, people already accustomed to this. As strange as it sounds, they do accustomed, things are settled in some way. People left from the east, some of them resettled to the west, some of them fled. New trade routes appeared, companies migrated from east to west, Some real estate developing is happening. It's kind of weird situation that you live through the war, but you carry on. I mean, I can assume there are much worse situations around the world. Obviously, I don't want to, tell that everything is cool or so. It's not, but people do carry on. And despite all of this, Ukraine is remaining a functioning state, which is super important. I've been to many countries which never seen the war in the recent time, but they are far, far in a worse situation than Ukraine, at least cosmetically. So things move on. The economy adapted, people adapted, and we just carry on. I don't know what to tell here. Welcome to Ukraine. Something what I can assure is that every Ukrainian city, it's safer than any big American city.
I mean, any Ukrainian city not close to the border and the war zone.
No one will go and will let you go closer to the front line anyway. But let's say if you draw a line, Odessa, Kiev, and everything to the west, zero problems to come. Please welcome, enjoy, nice gastronomy, good people, fast trains that never actually are late, as opposed to UK. Changing the tire takes 1 hour instead of 1 day, and a lot of things from evolving from this.
Yeah, that's the image as Ukrainian ambassadors, let's say like that, we are trying to project. We hate when people, як сказати, жаліють нас.
Feel sorry.
Feel sorry, pity. Yes, we don't want that.
No.
We are just trying our best, just support us, be with us. Like that's like what we would like you to think about us. That's why we are inviting you and we're telling you it's tough, but we are still keeping up.
Well, last question then on this. Well, maybe two questions. One longish one short one. The Kursk offensive, with the exhaustion and the fact that there's been really sort of almost a year and a half without any major progress, suddenly you have this incursion into Kursk, you have rapid progress, and it's on the territory of Russia, and it's launched 1,000 memes. Has this injected a little bit of much needed optimism and at least energy into both civilian and military Ukrainian life?
I can tell there are two sides of the coin over here. Number one, which I believe should have been done way before, is actually spilling the battlefield on the Russian soil. Just think of two boxers, with one of them just defending, another one punching in the face. You can never win if you play for defense or if you play for a draw. Mm-hmm. You need to fight back, and this is as simple as that. If you want a bully to stop, you have to punch back into the face. So this is one story. Second story is that it also felt in the media like things are slowing down and anybody is going to some kind of the settlement. So some people would tell we would rather keep things quiet instead of like putting more sticks into the fire. So some people don't like it. In my opinion, from this position of strength, this is good. Because we do need to spill over the battlefield on the Russian soil, and even all the red lines have been crossed from the perspective of Putin. Like they already forgot about the nuclear terror and everything else. It's like nobody talks about this anymore. We understand that there are holes and leaks in the back door of Russian Federation, right? And secondly, even if there will be some kind of settlement in the nearest time, I believe this can be a good bargaining power in that sense. So we'll see how things unfold. Something what I can tell is that historical Ukrainian lands kind of can spread out further than the current border of Ukraine, at least on the eastern direction. And, and we have to talk with the enemy with the same language that he only understands. And unfortunately, or fortunately, this is the language of the brutal force. In this case, absolutely justified.
And also, I just would like to add that generally, society, like Ukrainian society, is really like tracking all the day news and very anticipating and looking forward what's going to happen. We are afraid of losses, of like people are gonna die because we are attacking, it's obvious. So, but yeah, we needed that. That's what I told. It was too long for us. So we needed that injection of hope and action and good news, and we have it now. Hopefully, it will continue.
Well, the last question then is, what are you guys planning to do next to keep pushing this understanding, not just of Ukrainian identity and culture around the world, and helping people understand its resilience, but also why it's so important for Ukraine to win and retain its full sovereignty? What do you got coming up?
Well, there are a lot of things happening around. Some of the topics we didn't touch is actually I'm doing a lot of social activity within the Ukrainian sensu stricto sphere on the international level. So whenever we travel for work or other activities that we do as ambassadors, I'm also visiting and meeting a lot of Ukrainians all around the world. Something what people don't realize is that there are currently 12 million Ukrainians living outside of Ukraine. I'm talking about people with Ukrainian passport in the first generation who left for whatever reason. There are like 8 million who left during the active phase, and obviously there were some workers living in different countries and so on. Yeah. So when I started digging deeper, I realized that this number actually makes us third largest migrant nation in the world after Chinese and Indian. So this started to build up in my vision about Ukrainians as the global nation. So I mean, Ukrainians constitute like a lion's share of minorities nowadays in many countries around the world, mainly in the West. This gives a platform for a strong lobby. This provides a ground for some Ukrainian organizations and maybe even political parties in those countries in 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I'm working also actively on the field of building meaningful bridges between Ukrainians all around the world and between the Ukrainian diaspora and Ukraine. Because what now we understand clearly is that Ukraine became an integrated part of the Western society, and there is no way back. So this field is very important for me, and this is a very unique situation because people don't think about this, So I believe there is a good work to be done in that direction, which is also necessary to strengthen ties between Ukraine and the rest of the world.
Yeah. While Orest communicating a lot of the time with the diaspora, I'm trying to establish new contacts. So that's my aim. And through grassroots cultural diplomacy. So I will keep up because I see that it's going well. So that's what I'm good at. So I will continue. I have a couple of projects, one in Taiwan, another one in the US, and let's see how it goes in the future. So that's my aim. I will just continue what I'm doing now.
Well, I keep track of your work. Your podcast is fantastic. We'll pop a link to that in the channel. I know you're mostly broadcasting in Ukrainian now, Orest, but we'll pop a link in there.
I do have an English channel.
Do you have an English channel as well? We'll put the links into the description.
India, Bangladesh, those are both in English.
And I do have a Ukrainian audience now as well. I don't know what percentage it is, but I think it's 3 or 4% of my audience is Ukrainian, which is fantastic, and many in the diaspora. Well, it's been brilliant to catch up with you again in Oxford. I very much hope to do that again soon, and of course, hopefully to see you in Ukraine again. And just a heads up to the audience, we will be trying to organise more events and conferences like the one we had last year. Nothing like it has been done since. So I think it's incumbent on us to have another go and get to him.
Keep raising the bar higher and higher. Yeah,
definitely.
Absolutely.
High five.
Absolutely. Thank you, and brilliant to see you here.
Thank you for inviting.
Welcome anytime.